Lady C.
Yes.
It's busting baits tonight.
Busting baits.
Let's bust that intro.
Got off in town, resident on 70 Road. Got a nice wife and kids, y'all right inside the grove. You know I like Mr. Clark. Yeah, I should know he is my friend. Say if I just stay out the grave, he'll see that I don't go to the pen. Mr. Clark is a lawyer, he could lie stream. He's the first man to prove it.
What's going on, fishing friends? Welcome to another episode of the Crazyhorse Fishing Hour. How are you doing, Lady C?
I'm feeling good.
Feeling
good. I missed dinner tonight, that fabulous pizza you made, but I'm good. Yeah.
Man, my hands are all busted up. I've been working on a boat for the last couple of days.
Do macho stuff.
Yeah, when you're a glamorous YouTuber,
Oh my gosh.
you're broke all the time, so you gotta fix your own boats. You gotta be like a master DIYer. And the good news is, it's like I know how to do all sorts of things to an outboard motor now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Self-taught. Right on. Get it.
Well, let's not make this episode busted.
Okay.
I don't want it to be busted. I want it to be Bustin' Baits.
Wah, wah.
We are excited to have CJ Espey from Bustin' Baits on tonight.
CJ.
It's going to be a great time. As always, going to have some awesome prizes. But we got news. We got upcoming. We're really going to deep dive into kayak fishing with Zach Dittmars. I said his name right first.
Right on. Love kayak fishing.
Next week, we're going to really dissect it and, get every ounce of knowledge out of Zach Dittmars' brain when it comes to rigging kayaks, fishing with kayaks, all that stuff. The following week, an episode, not that I'm not excited about you, Zach, but I am really pumped about having the legend, the man, Kayak Kevin Whitley on the show. He hasn't been doing quite as much video over the last few years, but if you haven't heard of him, just go Google him, and you'll see him at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel catching fish as big as his kayak. It's absolutely awesome. Dude's got a ton of personality. Should be a lot of fun. After that, from the kayak bass fishing tour.
Ooh, kayaking.
Yeah, we're trying to make this show a little bit more national. We're taking this show on the road. And we're bringing in Christine Fisher from the kayak bass fishing tour. She made time for us, which is awesome, from her busy tour schedule. But this lady, flat out throws down on a kayak, and that is her job. I mean, she goes around on a Hobie kayak and fishes competitively, much like our guest tonight, CJ Espey. Let's bring CJ in.
CJ.
Hey, what's up, guys?
What's going on, brother? How are you?
I'm good. Hopefully my mic is a little better. We had that last-minute audio problem.
Yeah, we can hear you a little bit better. Just maybe speak up a little bit.
Okay. I didn't
Be a
want to
little bit louder. I hope your daughter isn't in bed already, because you might keep her up.
Yeah, no, it's all good. She'll be up for a little bit, but my wife will handle that. All this kayak talk, guys, got me excited.
Yeah, man. Well, CJ is the co-owner of Bustin' Baits. Bustin' Baits specializes in saltwater soft plastics. We were just talking about Christine and her competitive kayak bass fishing. CJ is also a competitive kayak bass fisherman. Have you ever fished against Christine, CJ?
I think I have in a few tournaments. I've fished mostly on the tour. I was traveling a little bit. I think before maybe she started traveling with the same tour. I did ABF. I know she does a lot of the Hobie Opens and stuff. But yeah, I fished a lot of those. I fished a lot of those same tournaments. I think she might have been in one or two.
So you trying to say you're a better fisherman than she is?
No, she's better.
Are you a better fisherman than Lady C here?
No,
is.
of course not. No way.
Of course he is.
Yeah, really didn't take long for me to go from like teaching her everything I know to she's better than me already. That happened like in like trip number 3.
Usually the way it happens, they learn fast, especially the women. I teach, my wife will go out and kick my butt on the boat, and I'm like, just taught you how to do that like, 1 trip ago. So.
Wow.
Well, guys, as always, I've got we've got a list of questions here that Anastasia, Lady C, and I are going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
But as always, the guest chooses the question of the night.
Yes.
And there's a prize for the question of the night. CJ, do you want to tell us about that prize?
Yeah, sure. So I just have one pack in front of me, but we will put a little prize pack together for whoever wins that. And if you guys send me the address, name, and I'll have it out sometime this week, and we'll get that to them. So it'll be a couple packs of probably a mix between our 5-inch and 7-inch bait.
You're the man. So tell us, man, when was the last time you've been fishing?
Well, it's been a few weeks. I did a good run on pickerel before we got like a good freeze on the Magathy. We were slaying pickerel really good for a good couple weeks. I mean, we were getting about 15 a trip, and it was real short trips, only about 4 or 5 hours, just hitting the different creeks on the Magathy. This time of year, we really like in the kayak. It's hard to get out on some of these lakes because they freeze up, and they just, I mean, if you're lucky to get one bite, fresh water and some bass. So hitting those pickerel are really what we like to do this time of year. But it's probably been about 3 or 4 weeks since my last trip.
So where are you catching pickerel?
So the other owner, my father-in-law, he lives on the Magathy. So he has a little launch that I'll throw in. It's off with Cocky's Creek in the Magathy, pretty far back. And I launched there, fish around the docks and stuff, anywhere like up on the in the Cocky's Creek, and I forget the other one that's right next to it.
So did you bring your presentation showing us your Google Earth shots?
No, I did not.
Well, you didn't get the memo. That's what this show is all about.
It's no secret. Anywhere
CJ
on the in the Severn, anywhere you can find. The hard part with the whole Chesapeake thing is finding a launch. I mean, you got all this shoreline and you can't launch anywhere. Everything's private. So, if you can get somebody that that, I mean, all those little hidden finger creeks have tons of pickerel in them. It's just trying to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we could talk about that, all night on another show. Maryland has more shoreline than I think every other state other than like California or something like that.
Yeah, but you can't fish any of it, so that's what that sucks.
Can't get in on any of it.
Yeah.
Well, you've been fishing for pretty much your whole life, right?
Yes. Yep.
Tell us how you got started fishing.
Man, back in my days of, being a teenager and, 10, 11, 12, we used to ride our bikes just to local ponds and just hit the local areas, the Patapsco State Park. We'd hit the river out at the Avalon. We catch like smallmouth. The stripers used to come up there when it was dammed up, and we used to be able to get like, 15, 18-inch stripers. And that's really how it started. Every summer on summer break, we would go miles from sun up to sundown. I sound like my dad and all the old guys. Oh, we never came home until the street lights came on. But it was true. I mean, we would walk in at the street lights come on, fish all day. And really, that's how I started. And just kind of kept going from there. Around 18, I bought like a $250 kayak from Dick's Sporting Goods, and now I'm in a Hobie. So, it slowly built it up.
Right on.
Right. That's awesome. Very different from my childhood. But anyway. So what is it that you're so passionate when it comes to fishing? Like what gets you going?
I think what gets me going is, I was so competitive as a kid, as a teenager. I mean, I grew up playing sports. I was playing football. I played baseball. And, as we get older and slow down a little bit from doing all that. I mean, I went from baseball to competitive softball for about 7-8 years, and I actually hurt my arm doing that. I tore my bicep, and that was kind of like the end of it. I was like, man, I'm too old to be getting, hurt. So to keep that competitive edge, I just fished and the tournaments. And honestly, I think the tournaments are what really keeps me going. I could fish a $200 tournament, like winnings, or a $20,000, $100,000 tournament. I get excited to catch the same fish no matter what. I don't care how much I'm going to win. It's just that competitiveness. And, I don't know if I would have stuck with fishing after that if it wasn't for this kayak series, and especially MAKBF. I mean, Matt Batten started MAKBF, and there was really no other tournaments around. And, the KBF wasn't real big. Hobie didn't even exist. And it was just a bunch of guys, and, we'd all hang out afterwards. And it was just, it was almost like that high school sports, competitiveness and camaraderie with the fellas. And that's what it was. And that's kind of what, where my passion is and why I keep doing it.
Yeah. And I'm sure the bent rod has something to do with it too, right?
Yeah. Oh, right. Absolutely. Like I said, I mean, I could be fishing for $200 or $20,000. I get that excited every time that rod gets, bent, trying to get that fish in, and, it's fun.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know if you've seen any of our videos. I get super excited over a bent rod.
Oh, we all do.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know. And no matter how many
times I say, oh my gosh.
No, I don't. I say other things. But yes.
If we didn't get that excited, we probably wouldn't keep doing it, and that's what I like about it. If I lost that excitement over a bent rod, I think I would probably just hang it up and go do something else. But I don't, and I can't. So
yeah, it's crazy. A couple of things you said really registered with me. The first was, the competition, right? The continued competition from it. You're the second guest this year. Travis Long, a few weeks back, mentioned that, like, not only the things that you brought up, like, being better than the next guy, right? But he said, as he gets older, it's really cool because even when he's not competing against the next guy, he wants to compete against himself and get better every time he goes out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and on the tournament scene, people are like, I'm like, I got to go out and practice this weekend. I spend my days on the weekends practicing. They're like, you practice for fishing? What is that? And I'm like, that's how I get better. I go find, those fish aren't probably going to be in the exact same spot that when tournament day comes. But if I know that they're sitting in 5 foot of water, I remember that and I keep going. And, I barely know what I ate for dinner yesterday and remember that. But you asked me about 5 years ago, fishing a body of water, that one tree over there is where I caught a, 3, 4, 5 pounder. And I just remember that stuff. And that's kind of what, I love about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that really resonated with me that you said was, you're talking about, when you sent me your bio, right? You're like, I've been fishing competitively from kayak tournaments for 10 years. And you were saying before then, it was just a group of guys.
Yep.
And it shows you how much the sport of kayak fishing has moved in the last 10 or 12 years. I was telling Anastasia, who's a relatively new angler, that, like, I was like, don't buy a kayak that's 5 years old because then they built them so you couldn't stand in them. Nope. You can't sell a kayak nowadays a fishing kayak if you can't stand in it.
No.
But 5 years ago, like, unless you were like an acrobat, you couldn't stand in any of them.
No, you couldn't. And I tell you, I told you at 18, I bought my first one for $250. It was the most uncomfortable kayak, but it was what there was. There wasn't really, Hobies existed, but I didn't even know what a Hobie kayak was. I just hopped in, and that was my first tournament kayak. I won my first tournament that I ever fished in that kayak. And as soon as I got like $400 from it, and I upgraded, to a better kayak. And, but you couldn't stand up. It was a sitting kayak that, I would never get in again, but that's what it was. And that's how I started. I was 18, just get my first job. And that's what my money went to, is fishing.
Yeah. Kayak fishing for me for the first several years was just like, whenever I went, I was like, I'm going to get a wet butt.
Yep. Yeah. Oh yeah. You get up and your whole pants were soaked, that's what it was, and I caught my first snakehead in that kayak. I didn't know what to do because I couldn't put anything in front of me. It was a sitting kayak. I'm like, this thing's going to bite my fingers off because everybody talks so bad about them. I'm like scared to death of it, you know?
Yeah. Well, my first experience was in an inflatable kayak that
Oh.
didn't have a rudder. I was going around in circles, and the person I was with is like, "Oh, you're doing it wrong." I'm like, "I'm former Coast Guard. I know this thing is missing a rudder because I'm going around in circles. It's not a woman
Didn't
thing.
even have a
It's
keel.
not a woman thing."
Yeah, no keel, no rudder.
Yeah, I was telling Grant this story, and it was in the stinky Potomac River. It smelled like sewage. There were signs everywhere warning you not to even be in the water. So that was my first experience, and caught a fish. Actually, we saw some dead fish floating, but I caught one. So yeah, we all have interesting stories.
Yeah, the inflatables have made an awesome. I mean, Jeff Little. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but you know he fishes out of an inflatable, and it's like really durable, super light.
Who's that?
Jeff Little. He's a big.
Oh
kayak.
yeah, the Torpedo. Yeah.
Yeah, Torpedo. Yeah. I mean, he's got one hooked up on an inflatable now, and it's like they're more durable. They're easier to carry around. It's insane. The evolution of kayaks has just been awesome to see.
Yeah. I actually owned a what is it? A boat. A boat rover.
Yeah.
It's an inflatable, I guess, skiff / paddleboard that you could put a 6 horsepower motor on it.
Oh, nice.
You know, I mean, we're talking about an inflatable. So, you know, I actually ended up getting rid of it because I had other needs. Well, I own a boat, so boats suck up all your money.
Right.
But, you know, the biggest thing for me that I was thinking about was like, you know, I have a pickup truck, but if somebody owns a Mazda hatchback, you can throw a 6 horsepower motor, deflate this thing, and you've got like a little mini bass boat, and you don't even like, you can live in an apartment.
Yep.
Like,
a lot of guys do it. I mean, you see guys all the time. I see them pulling up to the boat ramp in tournaments, and they're rolling up in these little like Subarus and you know, either on a roof rack or, you know, something like that. And they're super easy. And I love, you know, people ask me all the time, like, why don't you fish out of a boat? I choose not to fish out of a boat. I can go buy a boat if I wanted to, you know, I would have no problem doing it. I love the kayak scene. I love the traveling for tournaments, and that's just my thing, you know, especially some of them big KBF tournaments. It's a blast. Everybody's in a hotel, you know, all the guys and girls that fish a tournament, and, you know, you sit around, drink some beer, tell stories. It's just, you know, the whole scene is just awesome. I love it.
Yeah. Great stories.
yeah.
So what I really want to know is, how did Bustin' Baits get started?
So
Yeah.
I think we talked a little bit at the show last weekend about it, but Bustin' Baits literally got started in my little townhome, in my townhome basement, before I realized how toxic plastic was. And I mean, we ventilated, we had fans going, but we started.
That explains a lot, CJ. Actually,
yes, it does, right?
That's tick you have, you know,
freezing water and 4-foot seas and a kayak fishing, right? I don't have half the brain cells are gone. But I mean, me and my brother-in-law bought some molds, and we were like, let's just see what we can do with them. And it was all freshwater. Of course, I was a freshwater guy, so we started, you know, the freshwater, you know, making lures. And we soon realized after about 2 years that the freshwater market is saturated with baits. And, you know, you can walk in Bass Pro, you can pick up a 12, 15 pack of worms from Zoom for like $3. We were like, we just can't do this. What are we going to do next? And that's kind of where my father-in-law came in, and he was like, well, why don't we just start doing saltwater like jerk baits? And we were like, that's not a bad idea. I mean, you know, there's 1 or 2 companies out there that are doing it, but, you know, why don't we give it a shot? I mean, we want to do this. And so we bought a couple molds. We making them by hand, hours after hours, just making them just for one show. And we sold out the first show we ever went to. And it was quite a bit. I mean, it wasn't, you know, we weren't getting rich or anything, but we were like, man, maybe there is a market for this. So, you know, started in the basement. We were like, all right, we can't keep doing it in my basement. That's bad. Then we went to my father-in-law's shed and bought some equipment, bought some extra molds. And then slowly, every show, we started making money, you know, year after year. And we dumped it back into the business. And instead of paying ourselves, instead of doing anything, everything went back into business. And that's really how it started. I mean, we were just making stuff for fun. It was more of a hobby, but make a couple dollars on the side. And now we're manufactured. We got like legit bags. Before it was like, hey, let me print a couple stickers out and slap them on a bag, and so that's where we came from.
That's
so
awesome.
how about bust them? Who thought of that?
That was actually my idea. We kept coming up with all these names, and you search the internet, and because you don't want to take somebody's name or even be close to it really, because they'll get you for it if they want to. So Bustin' was mine. I'm like, what's like a common, although I was a freshwater guy, I was a saltwater, and you always hear about busting fish on top or busting them up, and I was like, what about like bust 'em baits? And my brother-in-law was like, hey, I like that. Let's see if that's available. And I went and did all my searches. There was nothing, so I was like, we're gonna roll with that. And everybody kind of agreed. My father-in-law, and they were like, and we just kind of rolled with it there. That was like one of our first big things was getting that name. And I had a buddy doing computer graphics. He made me up like this cool little logo and stuff. So that was that's where it started. And that's I was the one that came up with that name.
That's funny. Lady C and I were driving around, a month ago, and we were sort of talking and strategizing and thinking about, we really want, we're always fishing in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and we're like, we really want to make this, take this from a regional show and spread the show all the way down into Texas. And we were like, maybe we need to think about a name change. And we've never addressed this on the show. We've never talked about it. But I was just like, I wonder if the Fishing Channel has been taken. And I did a trademark search. The Fishing Network is there,
Fishing Network, right?
And I was like, how is that possible? And I was like,
oh wow,
it's not possible anymore. Yoink.
Well, that's funny.
That I think some people also thought it was taken, because when I searched it, it was the Fishing Channel 77, the Fishing Channel 6. I think everybody else thought it was taken too, because they had numbers after it. And
but that's great. Like when you market on like a Facebook and you just put the Fishing Channel, I mean, people search that kind of stuff. That's like a generic search. And it's funny that you say that about the name change, wanting to go down to Texas, because originally we were actually going to call our baits Baltimore baits, because we were all from Baltimore, and it just kind of flowed. And then I was like, nobody from Pittsburgh is going to buy Baltimore baits because of, just the rivalry in football, right? Like we can't pigeonhole ourselves into just one person not liking us for some reason, or regionalizing ourselves to where somebody up north is like, I'm not buying anything from Baltimore. So that was a big part of ours too. We just couldn't think of like that good name, and it took a little bit, to come up with.
You had a little bit more foresight than I did. Well, I've been we've been asking our questions, and questions have come in from the audience.
Okay.
MIG Migs Fishing says, do you rig your bustin' baits upside down? Settle the controversy for us.
Well, I can't settle it, because 100% that is something people ask. I think that all has a lot to do with a few things. One is the size hook that you're using, and how much plastic you want exposed. I'll try to see if I can show it on a camera. But one of the things that if you do hook it upside down, I will say you have to glue the bait to the jig head, because what you do, and this is with any soft plastic jerk bait, is when you hook it upside down, your hook is only catching on this little part of the bait. And then once you open this up, there's nothing else to grab on. So fish will tear that very easy. Once that's pulled down once, your bait's pretty much done. If you come through the body here and you get that hook, you got a whole lot more pull and stretch to any bait. So this one, we still glue it when we rig this way, but rigging it with this side up is, you want to make sure you have enough hook exposure, and you want to make sure your bait lasts longer if you're coming out of the bottom. I personally do not think it changes anything with that. Some people will say if you jig it up and it comes down, when you rig out of the belly, it gets it a little bit more free moving. I don't know. I haven't seen, I haven't had a day where a guy's rigging it upside down and I'm rigging it the other way and I'm crushing him, or he's crushing him and I'm not. The only thing I'll say is if you do rig it upside down, you're not wrong. And make sure you use glue so your bait lasts longer, because it will mess up this much faster, because there's no extra plastic under here to hold on with your hook. Hopefully
Now,
that helps. It's not solving anything, but that's just my opinion.
On a busting bait, let's say you were matching it with, a GI jig.
Yep.
Do you clip off the very tip of it?
I do.
Make it kind of streamline with the jig?
Yes. I give this little bit of a snip. You get a flat surface, and then you make it sure it sits flush with a little bit of Gorilla Glue, and it sits flush. Yes, I do that. Just I feel like it holds better, and it just pairs up with it much nicer, and that is one thing I do.
That's unique.
He said it's upside down. I consider it settled.
All right, deal.
I mean, he is the co-owner, so I mean
that's right. Upside down is not wrong. I promise.
Michael Cool asked, "Are there colors you prefer for different species and different times of year or water temperature? What makes you decide what color, when, and where?" Michael, you're stealing my questions, bro. I was going to say, this is time on this. Come on,
one
man.
of the questions, right? So that's a very good question, and that is probably the number one question we get at shows. I'll have a guy say, "I have $20. Give me your best colors." And the one thing that I'll say, and I heard Rich Jenkins, coach Jigheads, also talk about this weekend, just because we were paired up at the Pasadena show with our tables, is really there is no designated color for a fish. Now, I will say some fish, like you had mentioned, like a cobia, right? Cobia, we always get a lot of people buying pink, or flounder, a lot of people buy pink. And that's probably a go-to color for them. And I can't really speak a whole lot about cobia because I'm not a cobia fisherman. I just see what people buy for them. But I think what makes, and this goes for any kind of fishing, is color is really based on conditions, right? If it's a low light day and you're fishing, and there's not a whole lot of sun, right? I might go with a darker bait, something like this mackerel color here. Whoops, let me get it, sorry. Something a little darker, because if your water's stained, and this is kind of the opposite of what you see with your eyes, but if the water's stained or you get low light, this actually stands out better to most fish, right? It's like that silhouette. They just see this dark thing, and it's just better for them. Higher, like a brighter sunny day, summertime, I'm going to go with like a white or a chartreuse, your common colors, especially for striper. And we all kind of, like, when we go out and I fish, like, all of us will have something different. You got to kind of feel out what's working. And one of the things, and this is just an example, is it was a winter time. Me and my buddy were at the Bay Bridge, and him and I were using completely different stuff. And we were fishing this ledge. It was like a drop off going into the channel. And I was just hammering them 5, 6, 7 fish. And he's like, "Man, what are you using? What are you doing different?" And it was really just a color change. He made the color change. And it was like chartreuse to, like, I don't know, like pink or something. I don't remember what it was, but and he started catching them. And it's really just one of them things. Don't fish the same thing as the guy next to you until you know it's working. Conditions play a big factor, and every day conditions change. And just like I talked about practicing earlier, those fish don't stay in the same spot. They don't eat the same thing every day. So it's just feeling out what you like and what they like, what they want. Is it a 1 ounce jig head with a faster fall? Or are we going to go 3/4 ounce jig head, or a 3/8 ounce or a 1/2 ounce slower fall with a skirt? And I would just recommend take 4 or 5 rods out if you can, and something different. If you're over top of them and you see them on the depth finder and you're not getting them on one thing, switch up and see what happens. And that would be my answer to colors. And that's my canned response for anybody at the show is conditions drive fish to bite, and colors are going to be colors, and they're going to eat what they want.
You're a freshwater guy. What do you know about conditions, man?
Hey, man, I fished some really crappy conditions. I used to go down the Kentucky Lake, and it's a little different than up here. You get on that big open lake, it's bigger and wider in some spots in the Chesapeake, and man, we used to get pounded down there, and then water would turn dark and be muddy, and we throw black baits all the time, black chatter baits, black spinner baits, always that dark color in them dark water conditions. So yeah, the freshwater guys, that we get a little bit of we get beat up a little bit. Okay, give us a little break.
Yeah, CJ, hold up one of your busting baits. I want to ask a question that's specific.
Sure.
So the sort of wider body, and then the pinch before the tail, and then the sort of the snake tongue. Walk us through that bait and sort of what inspired that unique shape.
Yeah. So with this, you get your common body style, your shad body style. But one of the things that we really liked about this bait was, your other baits, like different companies, a lot of times it's just that straight tail, right? And you get a little bit of action with the straight tail, but it was like body straight into a straight long tail. And everybody really seemed to have that design. And that was just like well, what are we going to do different with that, right? There's other companies, local companies and big companies, like the Zooms. They look almost identical. So we found a mold for the 5-inch, and then we kind of crafted some of our own designs out of that. And that's where we really went with like this cutout. And first thing people ask, oh my God, you're going to get your tail pulled down. It's going to pull it off. It's going to rip the bait. Well, there's two things to that. And one is the plastic we use is a little bit more durable. You get a little stretch. Of course, this isn't like a Z-Man where you're stretching it, 5 feet or whatever they do. But you do get pull out of it, and it stretches. But most of the time, the fish that we're fishing for with this in the saltwater, they're eating these head first. They're eating entire things. You don't have to worry. The only time you're getting pecking fish are them really tiny little stripers, and even then, they're not going to pull this tail off. I mean, like I said, you got some wiggle room. If you glue the bait to the jig head, you're not going to lose it. And we've caught quite a few fish on one bait. They don't tear, but the action that you get out of that split tail is what we liked versus some of the other styles that were out there.
Mixed fishing. I thought this is a cool comment that I'd never even thought of. But he said, don't throw the end tail away. They're great for white perch.
Yeah, we've heard that before. Guys,
great idea.
Yep.
Another question. Let's see. So we're going to go through a list of fish, and we can talk about all night about this stuff. But how would you fish a bustin' bait for each of these species? And we're going to drop. You can bring up color if it's important, but the color question was already kind of brought up by Mr. Cool.
Mr. Cool.
But how are you going to fish a bustin' bait for a rockfish? And
rockfish.
I know that sounds really basic and like everybody on here should know, but we really try to customize this channel for someone who may be a seasoned angler or a beginner. So let's talk about rockfish.
Okay, so rockfish, basically for us, it's going to be your standard jig head, GI jig head, coach jig head, and we're going to either put a skirt on it or we're not going to skirt it. That's something we can talk about if you want to get into, but it's basically just, something that gives it a little bit more of a bulkier profile. They're silicone skirts with the rubber band. They stole them from us freshwater guys, but I won't say anything. And you just wrap it around and it just gives it a bulkier profile, and you can do that. I like the skirts sometimes. Sometimes the skirts, that is one of them things where you try it and the guy next to you might be catching them without them. So it's that trial and error type. But basically, it's going to be a jig head, glue the jig head and bait together, and you're just going to rig it normal, and we're going to snap jig it. Sean Kimbrough made it famous. Snap jig it. Even if you don't snap jig it, you're just kind of lifting it up. Depending on what you're seeing on your depth finder, are they suspended or are they on the bottom or are they up top? If they're on the bottom, we're going to use a weight or a jig head heavy enough to get down, and I can feel the bottom and make sure it's bouncing. If they're suspended, you might want to throw a skirt on there because it slows the rate of fall for one, and you keep it in the strike zone just a smidge longer, and you're probably going to downsize the size of the jig head too. So, that's kind of like one of those things like, whatever's working that day is going to work. But it's your typical jig head to bait and maybe a skirt.
Right on. So the next fish, let's talk about redfish. Anything in particular that you would do with a bustin' bait when you're targeting redfish?
All right, so can I mix the redfish and the trout? I'm gonna jump ahead. I think I've done a little bit of both of those guys, and I'm talking like more like your not puppy, but your mid-size, reds and trout that kind of hang together on those flats. And I'm not an expert red or trout fisherman by any means, but I do take that trip to North Carolina every year, just like you guys did, where we're fishing like grass flats or, something where they're really shallow. At that point, I'm not really going to use a jig head. And if I do, it's going to be maybe a 1/4 ounce jig head, something that doesn't fall real fast. But I'm a big supporter of the swim bait hook with the screw lock in the front. You screw it in, you got a weighted belly, and you're just going to kind of work it over the grass tops. And what it does is what we've noticed with our baits specifically is it gives it a jerk, but if you give it a little bit of jerking on that slack line, it makes it walk back and forth versus just pulling it straight back to you. So it's not coming straight. It's kind of like dancing a little bit, and it'll do that over the grass. And that's my limited experience that I have, fished for those fish. That's how we have done it down in the Carolinas when we go down. And some of the bull reds that I've heard is we've had guys. I've never really caught any bull reds, but I hear guys just fishing them like they do for the rockfish with the jig heads. I haven't personally done that, but I think it's kind of one of the things like what contours, what depths are you fishing, and go from there.
Yeah, I would add for bull reds, it is very similar to fishing for rockfish. You probably aren't going to do quite as much of the snap. It's a little, it's a little slower. Redfish, the way their mouths are shaped, they go around and eat stuff, not really quite off the bottom like a catfish, but more similar to that. So they're not.
Yeah, they got that drum mouth that just kind of like points down versus like wide open in the front, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. How about trout?
I would say trout. I would make. Are you talking speckled trout? I would imagine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would mix them in. Like when I've caught them, it's been the same for the redfish. Similar. On the grass flats. That's the only way I've ever caught them. You guys might have a little more insight. I'm not an expert trout. And I was, Grant and I were chatting earlier, and he showed me a picture, and I'm like, I never get to really catch them. So, we take our trip, it's on grass flats, and I fish them on a weighted swim bait hook, 3/16 ounce, and we're just, working it over top of grass, but Grant seems to know how to catch them. That's for sure.
She does too. She caught a gator this past year.
Oh yeah. Okay. You didn't share that picture. You only showed me yours.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I got to brag. She already gets all the attention. Come on.
I do not. Well, I can think of a good one. How about snakehead?
All right. So
My
snakehead.
favorite.
Now you're getting back into the fresh water. This is mine. So
set and spike. We're giving it to you, bro.
There's a couple things for snakeheads that we do. For the first thing that I do that a lot of people have, was given to me at a show. The guy was like, "Man, you have no idea how good your baits are on a chatterbait or a bladed jig." I don't know how familiar your audience is with that, but it's basically a vibrating head. A lot of action to it, but the head vibrates pretty violently and it shakes the whole body. Ooh. And with this split tail, he's like, you can't find a split tail bait like that. And he said, when it's going, this thing is just nonstop. And I never thought about it. And I'm like, man, that's a good idea. So I started throwing them on the back of my chatterbaits for snakeheads, because snakeheads, first of all, love the blades, and that attracts them right away. But when they start getting that wobble in that tail, that is a really good way to rig it. And also, if you get into the pad fields, I do the same thing with the swim bait hook that I talked about with the reds and trouts. Just something to keep it up in the water column. Snakeheads are kind of like hanging up high. They got them little beady eyes, and not really on top of their head, but they're kind of up. So they're always like looking up, like you're throwing maybe frogs for them, or something with a very light weight, and you just working it in and out of the pad fields. That's the two ways I fish for them for snakeheads, and I've heard other people.
Yeah, that's helpful, because I see snakehead fishing unlike any other fish I caught. It's more of a hunt than a fish. Yeah. Right. And obviously you have to lure them out, but You have to be really patient, and it really helps to have a really good lure. And that, what you said was really helpful. I just took note on it because I want to try it.
Everybody thinks that those snakehead are just these predator fish and they just eat everything. But like you said, they're very tricky. They're not easy to catch. And you really have to finesse those fish most of the time. Unless you get a good day where they're just all out eating, it's a finesse type of bite, and people don't realize that, and they think, oh, we're just going to go down here and throw anything in the water and catch them. And I'm like, no, that's not like that at all with those guys. And that's where I think when if they're not really hitting that chatterbait is where you slow down and you kind of fish that finesse, over the pads or in the pads, edge of grass lines with a weighted swim bait hook.
Yeah, I'd love to see a busting bait with a weighted swim bait hook. That's what our good friend Eric Packard is a big kayak fisherman. He loves using swim bait on a weighted swim bait hook. I think a busting bait would be a great pair with that.
They do really well. And they skip really well. So like when you're pickerel fishing because we do use them for pickerel and all, you can skip a mile under a dock, and just because they're weightless for the most part. I mean, they got a little tiny belly weight. But if you want to throw under a dock, you can and that thing will skip across the water and go all the way underneath.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm going to give this to Grant, the next fish.
What's that?
Cobia.
Oh, yeah.
That's your
I see a question on the screen. Do you?
Question. Okay, sorry about that. So David Hall, what recommendation or techniques would you give to beginner kayak who fears he or she might flip the kayak? I was just talking about this at Grant recently about how do some of these kayak fishermen pull these giants out of the water. I'd be afraid that my kayak would flip over because I weigh like next to nothing compared to how much they weigh. I would be afraid of flipping the kayak.
Yes. So that's a very good question, actually, and that's one of the things. So first of all, the fear part is taken out by using the right equipment, right? So you have always wear a PFD. I don't care if it's 100 degrees out. I don't care what it is. I always wear a PFD no matter what, because you just don't know like what could happen. You flip it over, you fall out, and let's say you get tangled up in your anchor line, or I've never told anybody this, but I had an incident happen to me, and I've been doing it for years. Last year up on the Susquehanna, where my kayak started going into this little ravine, like a little overflow, and it just took me in, and it actually rolled my kayak. Had my PFD on, got right out, and I didn't lose anything. Always wear a PFD, no matter what. Fishing tournaments, if you don't, you're automatic. If you get caught without a PFD, you're disqualified. So that's my number one thing. The number two thing is if it's cold out, wear a dry suit. Jeff Little has a million videos on dry suits, right? Carrying spare clothes in the wintertime. If you do fall over, a fire starter, he's big on that. Dry suit will buy you some extra time, from hypothermia. And then you get out and get to the shore, you start a fire. And I'm pretty sure he likes it. It goes all through his videos. That's my number two suggestion. And the number three thing is buy your second or third kayak first. If you're truly a fisherman and you're going to use it, do not go cheap on your kayak. And not everybody has the same budget. I get it. I know they're super expensive, but a good, decent kayak, you can go, I would say like a Wilderness Systems or a Bonafide. I mean, that's a good like $1,500 kayak that the only way you're going to flip it is if you do something wrong. And I always promote this place, Delaware Paddle Sports. They are an awesome place to buy kayaks from, and you can test them out. You see them. They will explain everything to you. If you buy your second or third kayak first, you will not be disappointed. And do not go buying a Dick's Sporting Goods with $200 kayak with what's on the market right now. That would be my three suggestions to fearing flipping a kayak.
That's a great answer, CJ.
Yeah,
you really knocked that one out of the park. Yeah. I would add, not really add, just kind of supplement what you said. There's a rule of 110 which is air temperature plus water temperature. If that number is over 110, you don't need a dry suit. If that number is under 110, you need a dry suit. Because so if it's like if the water's 50 and the air is 60, if you were to fall in and able to get back out, you're going to be able to paddle over to shore without getting hypothermia.
Yep. That's a great rule. I've never heard that before, so that's actually pretty good. I mean, I typically always try to wear some kind of, something, but that's really good to know. That's a good one.
Yeah. We have some other questions rolling in. I haven't even read this one yet, but Scott, again, Scott's going for longest question. Not best question.
It's good though.
I'm reusing that joke. I admit. All right, just messing with you, Scott. Scott says, "Have you considered using different rubber compounds such as elastic? I personally find softer rubber such as Z-Man's move especially easier, especially in cold water. Makes a huge difference. I use Bustum's, BKDs, Z-Man's. They all seem to have a special place and different characteristics in different situations. So I guess the question is, have you thought about using different compounds in your baits?
So no, that's a great question, Scott. And the thing is, if I had the formula for the Elastec, I would probably be rich along with Z-Man, because they are the only ones who have that formula and can use it as far as I know. That is not an available plastic to buy from any company. So basically what the companies that don't use it are forced to do is just mix and match with hardeners. And you can buy a soft plastic and like a plastic compound, and you can add hardener to it, and it stiffens the bait up. And we actually, for about the first 4 years of making soft plastic jerk baits, trial and error through the different hardnesses of baits and what works. If you go too soft, it's great because the action is like, man, it's unbelievable. You get so much more, but then you're losing a bait of fish, and people don't like that. And if you go too hard, you lose all of your action, but your bait will last forever. So it's like, you got to find that middle ground. And if you notice, like, you mentioned BKDs, they have a similar plastic to us, but that's all that's available. The Z-Man plastics are not available to your average company. That is a proprietary plastic that I believe like scientists figured out for Z-Man, and Z-Man just uses it on their stuff.
That's a really good question.
It is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Let's see who else we have here. I can't see it.
I'm in D-Train.
D-Train 147. Why doesn't your baits come with paddle tail for beginners or someone it's advanced in jigging?
Someone that isn't advanced in jigging.
Thank you.
So that's another good question. There comes I'll get into a little bit of like the inside of bait making. Is every time you change a color, if you change a centimeter size of your bait, that is a lot of money. And all that stuff, we're not, Bustum guys aren't rich dudes. And it costs us a lot to get started when you start getting into the manufacturing. And we had to be manufactured because we were just, overwhelmed with orders. So our step was, and this was only a couple years ago, was to get manufactured. So we're slowly building our arsenal of baits, but it is very expensive to do that. And especially this now with, oil prices, because this is all petroleum based. So when people see, prices of baits rising, this is all based on petroleum. So, we pay more and then we got to raise our prices. And it's just that whole, cost, effectiveness of, okay, now, we got to buy a production mold. Well, production molds are super expensive. So maybe it would be nice to, get to that point where we have paddle tails and all that stuff. But, we had to start with what we had and go with it.
CJ, I think you guys are doing great stuff, man. I mean, I fished with your baits even before we met at the expo. One thing I've really always liked about them, and I think I mentioned this to you when we were talking in person, is that tail is not only has a ton of action, but it's just a little softer than your average bait, and it may get bitten in half, or may fall off that keeper. But it also, being softer, that I think that fish will hold on just a little bit longer.
Yeah, and Grant, like I said, just a little bit ago with the plastic comment, is it took us a long time to get to that middle ground of our baits don't rip easy, but we also don't lose action. And my brother-in-law was the brain behind that. He made baits all the time in the shed, and he would always come up with different colors. A lot of these colors that you might see out there, like the churple. I mean, he took two plastics and just mixed them together and came up with churple one day and was like, let's call it churple and see what people like. Just took off from there. And so that the density of plastic took quite a bit of time for us to really get that down, adding hardeners. And then then you have to take it to our manufacturer and be like, here's how we did it, we need you to do the exact same. And that's where making paddle tails, it just gets expensive, because we gotta work a lot of kinks out. And we don't go, no offense, but we don't go to China to get our baits made. Everything's made in the USA. So it is a little bit more expensive for us, to then shipping overseas and doing that.
No, and I appreciate that. And I understand, as a small company,
yeah,
a change in design like that is expensive. And honestly, I kind of admire the fact that you guys really are putting in the time to perfecting your current design before branching out. I mean, you're not Berkeley, right? You can't just say snap your fingers and let's create a paddle tail.
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. And and I don't want to I stay on the same question too long, but the other part is what we're making baits for is very I guess you can say regional. So the guys down south don't really snap jig, and they don't do that. Or the guys in New Jersey, they fish for stripers with hard plugs and big giant baits. And it's not like it's easy for us to go to these other states and spread the market. And that's another thing. We're not getting rich, because Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, Pennsylvania guys, we're doing okay in that market. But trying to expand out, they're like, jigging, what are you talking about? We cast plugs, or something like that. And it's like, oh, okay, we did 4 shows in Jersey, and we couldn't even cover the cost to drive to Jersey, because those guys were just like, we don't do that. And it's tough.
Yeah. I got another question coming in from the audience. Mixed Fishing asks, this is kind of a big one, but I'm sure you can answer it. You want to read it?
Oh, okay. Top 5 upgrades you must have on a fishing kayak.
All right. Good one. No, I love these questions, man. I could talk all night. We could go all night about
5.
All right. So I'll keep it fairly. I'll keep it cheap, and then I'll give you a couple expensive ones too.
Sure.
First things that I like is I always have an anchor. An anchor trolley is a really or anchor wizard. I'm sorry. There is a device. It's like $100. It's a circle, and you wind it up and it drops the anchor down. Must have an anchor if you want to stay on fish. Anchoring is huge. Number 2 is depth finder. You can get them for $300-400 now. Have to have one. I can't, if I don't know the depth that I'm fishing, I'm useless on the water. I wouldn't even do it. The other one would be, I would say a good paddle would be good. Like you get them carbon fibers versus heavy plastics. If you plan to do an 8-hour day of fishing, you don't want to wear yourself out too bad if you're paddling. I think the other one would be like a good rod storage, like a Yak Attack Black Pack. I take a couple rods with you. Don't limit yourself to one rod. I mean, changing baits is time on the water, and I'm a tournament guy, so I can't tie on a new bait every time I want to switch. I take out, and I get this comment. If I had $1 for every time I heard it, that's a lot of bait. That's a lot of fishing rods for a kayak. Yeah, well, I'm in a tournament, and I'm not tying every time I want to go from a chatterbait to a crankbait to a jig to a whatever. I have a Yak Attack Black Pack. It's got 6 rod holders, and my Hobie has 2, and I keep one between my legs. So, we're looking at 6, 7, 8, 9 rods I take, most of my trips. So that's 4, I think, right?
Mhm.
And next one, I would just say, I don't know.
I got one.
All right, go ahead.
The chair.
Oh, chair. Yeah, there you go.
Seriously.
Yes.
I mean, I lose feeling in my legs and my toes on the wrong
Yes.
kind of seat.
Like on that sciatic nerve, it just like sends you that sharp pain down your leg. And yeah.
Yeah. It's just really uncomfortable for, especially when you're going snakehead fishing. I mean, we're out there all day, and sitting on an uncomfortable chair, it's just too much.
Yeah, and I mean that goes along with you can buy kayak cushions. They got an actual device, a kayak cushion. It's almost like a seat cushion. It's no different, but they make them specifically for like kayak chairs. So that was a good one. That's my 5, and then my 2 expensive ones that I would.
No. That's 4.
Oh, 4.
She gave you one.
All right, yeah. That's
5.
All right, 2. I'll give you 2 expensive ones. We'll even go 6 then. 2 expensive ones. If you're a tournament guy and you get big into it, or even if you're not a tournament guy and you want to fish for a long time and you can spend 8-9 hours on the water like I do, the 2 things I have is a Torpedo, which is expensive, but it is a game changer when it comes to that. And I would say a power pole over an anchor. I love the power pole. I use my power pole micro anchor more than anything. I've had it since I can't even they last forever, and the batteries last forever, and it's just a must. I mean, you can anchor up to 7 foot, and if I'm in anything deeper, I'm not really anchoring most of the time and fishing anyway. But power poles are good.
Yeah, we're about to put 2 of those on the back of our flats boat, or Boston Whaler.
Yeah, they're durable.
We went fishing with a
Captain Dana
Tabarini down in North Carolina. Friend I met through Lady C here, and at the end of the day, he pulls his boat up to the ramp, pushes a button, and his talons go.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't need that for my little boat.
No,
so I'm gonna get something like it because that is cool.
Yep, and you just you wear the necklace, you hit the button, and goes down, and then you don't. I mean, it's basically hands free after you double tap the button to come down, and then double tap it to come up, and it just looks like a key fob, like you lock your car with. It's awesome. They're really good.
Yeah. I was talking to a buddy today that is a big solo skiff guy.
Okay.
And I owned a solo skiff for a while, and I put a Minn Kota spot lock motor on the front of it, and it was a little bit big, but it was awesome. Like, I can't fish without a spot lock. But if I had to do it again, a solo skiff and a kayak, most of the time you're fishing in less than 8 feet of water. Yeah. Almost all the time. Yeah. And if I had to do it again, I would do the lighter weight option and put a power pole on that thing.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. I love the power pole. I think my next kayak upgrade is going to be Panoptics. I want Panoptics on mine. That's my next one.
It's a video game then, bro.
Yeah, but whenever you got to play the same game, man, if you want to compete. And, if I want a video game fish with the best of them and these reservoirs for these tournaments, I mean,
absolutely.
You have to.
For tournament fishing, you're absolutely right.
It is. It's insane. They're cheating. I'm surprised they even let them use them on tour, but they do.
Yeah,
it's like taking steroids, isn't it?
It's kind of like taking steroids. Yeah, yep. I'm kind of like an old man on this, but
I'm with you.
As I enter my mid-20s, I'm noticing myself thinking like it's not going to happen, but we really need to curtail the advances in fishing technology. Yeah. I mean, it's a big part. It's part of what we talk about when we're talking about, preservation of some of these species. Is like we got braided line and carbon fishing poles, and fluorocarbon leader, and now we have Panoptics that you have a camcorder looking at what's going on down below the water.
Yep. Yeah. What do you think? Like the Jimmy Houstons and the all them guys, the Roland Martins from back in the day would think if they even knew back then what we were going to have now, they would be like, this is easy. I mean, those guys did it the old school way, and that is, the good thing is that's how I learned to fish is the old school way, with nothing. But like you said, to compete and stay up with everybody, It's almost a must.
Yeah. Phil's trying to come in and take a late lead in question of the night.
Sure.
It's a long one. I was recently talking to Grant about the hassles of kayak fishing. We were talking about that. What are the tips you have for making trips as hassle-free as possible?
I.e. transporting
Yes.
to minimizing tackle.
Well, there's a couple options. If you don't own a pickup truck, obviously, there are a few options that I see guys. I own a pickup truck, so I throw my kayak in the back. I have a Boondocks tail that comes out, which is basically a support for the back end of my kayak. And I just ratchet strap everything down to a decent pressure. Like, you don't want to over ratchet strap your kayak ever, number one, because if it's hot out, you will warp and bust your kayak. And I've done it before. So lesson learned. Don't ever ratchet your kayak tight. That plastic will melt, and then ratchets will disform your kayak. Mm-hmm. So the other thing is, you can get those cheaper trailers around, like a Harbor Freight that will do just fine. I mean, you're not carrying a lot of weight. You're carrying, a couple 100 pounds. The one thing that me and my buddy did is we bought a jet ski trailer. I think I used jet ski trailer for like $300, and we just went to Maine and got it titled for $120. And, we put some pipes on there, some PVCs, and it works great. I don't, depending on what you have. The other hassles that you mentioned, like tackle, if you do something like the black pack, like I said, it's a box, it's a hollow box. So not only do you have the rod holders on the outside, you have the empty box. So you just grab some Planos or whatever, you take a couple, you throw them in there. Tackle's probably the least of the hassle. I mean, you can really figure that one out. Like, once you get on the water, you're like, oh, I could do this, or oh, I might want to do that. The other hassles, I mean, it just really depends. I don't have any hassles. I think it's great, but you can find some very good deals on trailers. I mean, I found a $300 dual jet ski trailer that we turned into a kayak trailer. Put a little elbow grease in it. It wasn't in great shape, but it works. And I don't know. I mean, if you want to throw something out, like an example of anything else that you think's a hassle, I can give you some ideas for it, because I've probably been through it, but it's up to him.
Well, if you can help me with making it more hassle-free to get a kayak on my tiny 2011 Toyota Corolla, that'd be awesome.
That's a tough one.
Manhandle.
Do you have a roof rack, or do you just put like mats down and strap it? Do you have like a roof rack?
I have a rack now, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that might be a little better. That's still tough, though.
It is tough. It takes me a while. Yeah.
All right,
get strapped down.
Pickup truck. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. All right, where were your questions?
We're gonna close it out with that.
Okay, so this is an important question. Yeah, where can people buy Bustin' Baits?
All right. So for one, we always like supporting the local tackle shops, and we are probably in just about every local tackle shop in Maryland that I know of. I mean, if there is one that we're not in, just have somebody let me know, and people can get them. I mean, we're in all the big ones that are around in this area. We do sell online, www.bustinbaits.com. That's our website. So you can get them there, and I think that's about it. But mostly you can go to tackle shops. I mean, we're in tackle shops from Canada down to, I think, North Carolina. We're obviously down south, we're not in as many, and we're not in as many up north. But between PA, Virginia, Delaware, and Maryland, you can find us somewhere local.
Good stuff. Craziest thing ever.
Oh, that's a good one. Everybody's got a crazy story, right?
It's kind of a tradition on this show. The
way
that we close this show out.
Yeah.
Crazy story. So as if you guys don't know by now, I am a kayak fisherman, and
every kayak fisherman has a crazy story.
So I'm a northern guy. Obviously, I'm from Maryland, born and raised. Never really got out. And one of my first trips down to Santee Cooper, down in South Carolina, Lake Moultrie, Lake Marion, the captain's meeting, the guys like warns us like, hey, look, it's alligator mating season, and you guys have to be careful around these alligators. They're like, these aren't 5-6 foot alligators. We're talking 10, 12 foot alligators, well, whatever. So I'm out there and I'm fishing, and I look down, and there's this big white carp. It had to be 25 pounds. And I have a picture of it. I'll send it to you if you want to see it. No joke, 25 plus pounds. I'm like, that's weird. Why is it like just sitting there? Well, what I didn't see, it was in an alligator's mouth, like right underneath of me. And this alligator was huge. And I'm like, I got to fish here all week. Like, oh man. And I realized, like, alligators and kayaks do not go well for a northern guy. I don't do well. And I was like, okay. I like slowly backed out. I'm like, at least he's got a mouthful and he can't come get me. But it had to be a 25 plus pound carp just sitting sideways in his mouth. And I'm just like, oh man, it's going to be a long week of alligators. So that was my story. That was my crazy one.
Wow. So we're actually just seeing a ghost of you. The alligator got you a long time ago, right? Yeah. Well, it is that time of night. We'll do a drum roll. CJ, do you have a question of the night for us?
Let's see. I'll go stick with the kayaks. I like the top 5 kayak upgrade question. I like that one.
Okay.
That would be Miggs Fishing. Miggs, I will reach out to you and get your address, and I'll get that address over to CJ, and we'll get those busting baits out to you. CJ, man, it's been a pleasure. You're super knowledgeable. God gave us a little bit of a freshwater perspective. I grew up freshwater fishing, actually. But I actually wasn't very good at it. I feel like I'm a better saltwater fisherman than I am a freshwater fisherman. This is your opportunity to say it's because freshwater fishing is actually challenging, right?
I bit my tongue. I was going to say it, but I'll save that. Let Christine get on you guys a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm sure she will.
But thank you guys for having me. I really do appreciate it. And although I talk a lot about freshwater, I am a saltwater guy too. So I do know if anybody has questions about the baits or whatever to catch stuff, you can always email us. It is bustinbaits@gmail.com. I can give some tips if I do know a little bit, but I just do mostly freshwater fishing. So thank you guys for having me. I do appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Great energy, good conversation. Felt fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, Bustin' Baits, as he said, they're at just about every tackle shop in Maryland and at bustinbaits.com. Go out and get these baits. They're really effective. Tear up those snakehead and the saltwater species we have around here. Thanks so much, CJ, and see you all next time. Thank you so much for everyone who logged on and those who participated. See you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Got off in town, resident on 70 Road. Got a nice wife and kids, y'all right inside